I want to welcome to the program, good friend of the program. You've heard him here before, Senator Tommy Tuberville. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How's everybody?
We're good, Coach. I mean, I got to tell you, we're in football season here. We're just as enthusiastic as you can be. I imagine you are too.
Uh, it's always busy here in Washington D.C. in what I call the sewer, but it's good to have football season going on. It gives me something else to think about during the day. Like today, hey, I got a chance to go and maybe watch a game tonight or whatever. It's exciting to have something different to do, and
Yeah,
we're making a little progress up here, but right now we're kind of spinning our wheels.
Well, we are spinning our wheel. I want to talk about your efforts as it pertains to NIL in particular. But before I do that, let's get a little overview of the college season, and then I know you follow NFL. I mean, hell, if you can play football, you're following it. Where do you think things stand out there?
You talking about the NFL?
Both. Let's start with college. What do we think?
Well, college sports has been my life for 40 years, and never spent much time in the NFL. Of course, trained a lot of young men to go to the NFL, but college sports has done a lot for our country and for a lot of people, men and women. And I think we got to understand that our education system, and that's one of the reasons I ran for this position here in Washington, D.C., because I've seen how our education has dropped in the last 40 years. Where, a lot of these young men and women, especially in the urban areas, they go to school for 12 years, they get out, they get a diploma, and heck, they can't even read their diploma. Mm-hmm. We got so many that can't read, so many that can't write. We're teaching a lot of things in our schools that we shouldn't be teaching. And so I ran for this position, and I won. And I'm on the health education committee, and I get to spend a lot of time talking about education, looking at the future of education. So I think it's important that we understand why sports is important in our country. High school, college, it teaches so many things. And if we get away from that, right now we're getting ready to talk about NIL, we're getting away from the education part, and we're talking about money. It seems like everything in this country comes down to about money and money and money. And that's fine. That's what makes the world run. But you got to understand, you got to earn that money. And you got to get it the right way. And I hate that, we're going down this path that we possibly could turn into a minor league system, college sports, for the NFL or NBA. That's not what we should be. But it looks like we're headed down some path in terms of these young men and women making money in college sports.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. So what we're talking about is the name, image, and likeness, shorthanded as NIL, which following a bunch of litigation over a bunch of different years, permits athletes to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, as it suggests in the acronym. This is obviously controversial for years, right? I mean, you saw Ohio State players, better part of a decade ago, signing autographs for $50 that basically had their entire college careers destroyed over, which I think we could all agree was not the right way to handle it. But on the other side, then we've got, boosters and everybody else putting together these big pots of money that basically are trying to lure recruits with financial incentives, which of course, for somebody who operated in college athletics at the time you did for as long as you did, that's like the third rail that you stay as far away from as you possibly can, and got a lot of people in trouble if they didn't. So how does this whole thing sit right now as you see it?
Well, let's look at the background here for a minute. For years, young men and women have come to a university on a scholarship, and over the years, certain things have been added to that scholarship. If your parents made such and such amount of money, under that amount of money, then while they were going to college and getting that scholarship, they could get $3,000 or $4,000 cash a semester, non-taxed. A few years ago, we added the cost of attendance, which was another way to give money to student athletes.
That's
Every
like
student athlete.
housing and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember now, a scholarship pays for room, board, and tuition, books, and you really don't have any. You don't have any bills to pay. But so they passed this cost of attendance. So at the end of the day, basically, almost every athlete at every university got $3,000 or $4,000 either a semester or a year on top of their scholarship, on top of the grants. So there's a lot of money already given. Now, what's happened over the last 10 years, the money has become gigantic in terms of these schools making money on their TV contracts. So these players are looking at this going, wait a minute, you're using my name and my image and my likeness to make all this money. And why can't the players get some of this? Hey, I've always been for every player getting as much as they possibly can. There's got to be a limit to this. But they created a lawsuit. Last year, the Supreme Court says you have to allow players in college to make money off their name, image, and likeness. That's basically started this whole thing. So for a year now, these players have been going out and doing commercials and signing autographs and making all this money. But the problem is it's taking a lot of money. It's sucking the air out of money donations to universities that build facilities for all athletes, men and women, to pay for scholarships, to do a lot of things that help every sport. You got to remember now, most sports don't make money. They lose money. And so that money's got to come from somewhere. Most women's sports lose money. They don't get the people buying tickets in most of the sports, maybe basketball a little bit, maybe softball. Then you have swimming, you have the Olympic sports that don't make money. So that money's got to come from somewhere to pay for all those sports. So we're running into a situation now after a year that all these boosters are saying, I'm not going to give money to the university to build facilities and to pay for scholarships. I'm going to give my money to individual players. And so the money now is not going into the athletic programs. And so you're going to have a lot of these programs that's going to go bankrupt. They're going to have to start cutting out, some sports, possibly women's sports, and maybe cutting back on scholarships. So we're taking from Peter to pay Paul. Mm-hmm. And so how do we rectify that? And so a month or so ago, Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat, and I got together and said, listen, you know a lot about sports. I played college sports. Let's see if we can help them. I hate that we have to get involved in this. And so that's the avenue that we're headed as we speak. The NCAA will not, they've pretty much washed their hands of this. They're trying to put in a few rules and regulations.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they've been doing a whole lot. I mean, it's basically as anything interacts with college athletics. I mean, whether it's sports gambling or whether it's NIL or what have you, they basically take a step back and like, all right, well, whatever you all want to do.
Well, they don't want lawsuits. And nobody wants to be in a lawsuit. But right now, they've got a lot of lawsuits going on other things. NCAA has been a good organization, but when it comes to standing up for what's right or wrong, they kind of wash their hands. Well, they've washed their hands of this. Mm-hmm. And so for the last year, what I've seen as a former coach being here in Washington, D.C., I've seen and heard from coaches, commissioners, athletic directors, listen, we don't have any rules. I mean, it's the Wild Wild West. We don't have rules like we used to when you could actually go out and had a timeline of when you could recruit. And when you could actually do things in the proper manner. And so we've got 50 states now that are doing everything totally different. Nobody's on the same wavelength. So Joe Manchin and I have said, listen, the players are going to make money. Supreme Court said that's over. And so they're going to make money. What we're trying to do is put some organization to the rules, regulations, and give the coaches and players and parents an opportunity to have a real life instead of just every day being pummeled by recruiting and recruiters when there should be a time limit to that. So we're not trying to stop anything. We're just trying to get college sports back to some normalcy. Mm-hmm. and really understand that, hey, everybody needs to be the same way. Everybody needs to go by the same rules. The money's going to be offered. The problem that, again, that I would like to be able to put some kind of sense to is be able to save a lot of these sports, women's sports and Olympic sports, when it looks like in the future, if we keep going this direction, there's no money that's going to be there to help pay for some of these. So that's kind of
your
where
point
we're
is
at.
your point is a good one. One of the things, and I imagine this is kind of what you're delving into, but you hear from an awful lot of college coaches is, how do you reorient the recruiting process to be competitive, right? I mean, it's one thing if you're Nick Saban at Alabama, who Manchin's boys with, by the way, where
Yeah.
you know that these guys are going to have the ultimate platform to showcase their talent. But, a half step or two steps underneath that in those programs, those coaches are trying to figure out what if they have to put together financial incentives themselves, right? I mean, do they have to ultimately organize boosters to take a look at their program to support players for their own advertising? Or is that part of the job, which has got to be, I mean, for those of them who have been in the business for a while, that's got to be a really disorienting experience.
Yeah, and again, we go back to what I talked about earlier in this podcast was just remember the things that really help our country is teaching teamwork and dedication and a sense of being a team player. All those things. Well, what's being under attack right now is we're making everybody an individual contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's going to be there. We've got to get to a point. There's these groups now at every university called the collectives, and they're the groups within the boosters of each university going out there raising money, millions of dollars to put into a pot to let the coaches know this is how much money you've got to go out and offer to these players. Some groups are going to have $15-20 million. Some teams are going to have, $500,000. I mean, so what's going to happen here is you're not going to have a sense of balance. Now, going back to Joe Manchin and myself, we're not getting involved in that. Now, I'd like to put some kind of regulations and making sure they're doing it the right way and offering money, but we're not into that point. What we want to do.
Let me stop you on that point, because I think
Okay.
that's a big issue, right? Because when name, image, and likeness is litigated, what it's talking about is specifically players who've risen to a level that garner the kind of attention where they have people who want to buy their jerseys, who want them to sign autographs, who want to, do shoe ads or whatever. But where this has been sort of driven down to is, how do these boosters collectively put a pot of money together where you can then go to somebody who's just as anonymous as I am and say, you're guaranteed this amount of money if you come to this university, right? Which is kind of totally perverts the entire purpose from the beginning.
Yeah, and what most of them are doing is they're giving money to these collectives in the regards of marketing. In other words, say I own a shoe business and I sell dress shoes, and so I said, listen, I want to give $100,000 to put in the collectives, and whoever you give my $100,000 to, I want them to do an advertisement for me for my shoes, or I want to have them come to my stores and sign autographs. That's all legal. Now, that also is deductible because it is marketing money from their business. So they get to write that money off. If you give money to a foundation, it was passed up here a few years ago in Washington, D.C., that foundation money is not deductible. So now you're getting a better effect. Deal. Yeah, better deal by the boosters of giving money because they can write that off in their business. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to this. Again, we want to put some sense of reality of coaches have called me back in May. Usually in May in recruiting in football, everybody's out going talking to players, watching spring practice, getting your list for the next year. I'd call some of my friends who were coaching this past May. Hey, where you at? Where you recruiting at today? Well, I'm not recruiting. I'm out raising money. So Everything's changed. It's all about money now. Whoever's going to have the most money in their collectives, and I don't know what it was last year. I think they were saying that Texas A&M gave $30 million or something from their collectives to a recruiting class. Now, right or wrong, that's all legal, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But that just goes to show you the haves. You think that, well, Appalachian State, you think they're going to have $30 million next year to offer, recruits? They're not going to have it.
Right.
So you're going to divide even more. You're going to have the have and have nots. That's what's going to happen. But again, the cat's out of the bag on that. And then you throw the other problem into the scenario that we have in college sports is the portal, transfer portal. You can transfer at any time.
Yeah.
And that, so you're going to have the smaller schools that's going to have the opportunity to recruit a good player. And all of a sudden, man, this guy's really good. And then one of the big boys comes in and says, we want that kid. We're going to give him $500,000 to come. Well, that school doesn't have $500,000. So you're not going to be able to build a program off of 2 and 3 stars that all of a sudden jump up to a 4 or 5 star because of how they've grown the first year or so that they've been there. So it's all the good players are going to go to the 10 top teams is what's going to happen.
So to be clear about what you all are trying to do, like you said, you're not trying to shut down the compensation for name, image, and likeness. The courts have spoken on that. Where are you specifically focusing your efforts?
Well, just the organization of when you can do it,
mm-hmm.
who can do it, and put a recruiting calendar back into the so-called NIL that we have now. There's no calendar. I mean, you can, but for instance, last year in the state of Alabama, in my state, the schools in the state could not offer, this is my understanding, could not offer a kid money in high school. In other words, if he's a high school senior, you can say, okay, you come to Auburn, or you come to Jacksonville State, or you come to South Alabama, or you come to Alabama, and we'll give you a $100,000 contract for a car company. Well, you couldn't do that because the state law said you can't offer money like that. Mm-hmm. Some states didn't have that. I mean, you got some states out there, even recruiting 11th graders. Say, listen, we're going to give you this when you give out. You need to go and commit to us. So what you have right now is, again, like I said earlier, it's the wild, wild west. Some people can do it, some people can't, and you can't have that in collegiate sports. It has to be a fair and level playing field. Now, it's not going to be a level playing field on the money. Some people have more money than others, but you got to have the ability to at least think you can do it and have some kind of sense of reality, and for the coaches of when they can do something and stay within the parameters. There's got to be some, you can't, to me, you got to put rules on coaches, because if you take rules off all the coaches and it's no rules, I mean, you are going to have a mess. Because you're going to have there's no limit of coaches now, by the way. There's no limit. So you can go out there and hire 10 coaches and said, hit the road, don't come back until you've raised this much money, and start offering scholarships. I mean,
which is what it is, right? I mean, if you were to reorient your program today, what you would do is go out and hire the 5 best fundraisers you could find, and then set them loose, right? I mean, you deal with offense and defense and special teams a little bit later. We got to raise that money.
Yeah, the heck with the offensive line coach and the defensive line coach. That's
wild.
Because the players win games. I mean, you if you've got the best players, normally you're going to win. Now you can, I've been known to screw a game or two up, most of us have, but if, more than likely, if you got the best players, you're going to win the game. And so that's what it's coming down to. And I mean, you've got these smaller schools out there trying to raise money to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, and it's impossible. So college sports is not going to be like you and I have known, for the last, 10, 15, 20 years. It's going to change. And again, Joe mentioned, I want to put some sense of reality into it and give people an idea. Hey, this is exactly what you can do. If you got the means to do it, go do it. But this is the time limitation. It's not a 12-month recruiting. You got to give some of these folks some relief, and this is not just football. It's basketball. It's baseball. We all had a recruiting calendar, when you could do something, when you could make phone calls. They don't have that anymore. It It's just go after it and, hey, let the best man win.
I mean, so one of the interesting, I mean, you look at like what Deion Sanders is doing at Jackson State, right? Where he's basically, I mean, first of all, it's fascinating because I think he's doing a hell of a job in a lot of ways, but it's fascinating because he doesn't have the kind of budgets or exposure that obviously the big schools do, but he is Deion Sanders, right? And people like to watch Deion Sanders. So he's basically created like almost like a online reality TV show to promote the exposure of these players in the program. And it seems at some level to be working pretty well, but it's an idea of how different you would have to run a college program in order to compete.
Oh, exactly. And of course, it's about contacting and getting in front of these kids. And Deion Sanders he's a name, one of the best athletes I've ever seen. I coached against him when I was at Miami, and he was at Florida State. I mean, this guy was unbelievable. And players over the years have watched him because of being on the NFL shows and being an NFL player. And we're a big minority in sports and football. And of course, he's at a school in Mississippi, and he'll do great there. He'll continue to do great. I won't be surprised if somebody starts to say, "Listen, he's the thing of the future. We're going to take him here, this school."
I've been surprised that hasn't happened already because he's changing the game down there. But it does give a good education in everything you're talking about. I mean, unless you're going to entirely revolutionize college athletics and make it so you're trying to provide a platform for exposure and financial compensation, man, there's got to be some rules of the road.
Oh, there's got to be. I mean, corporations have rules and regulations. Wall Street has rules and regulations. Everybody that deals with money's got to have some kind of regulation. Banks have regulations. So you got to put some parameters on it. You just can't just say, listen, just anything goes. And right now, that's what we've got. Anything goes. And so we got to start doing contracts. We got to make sure the players are protected. I mean, it's easy to say, hey, you come to University X and we're going to give you $200,000, and you get there and you get in the meeting one day, he's not quite as good as what we thought.
Yeah. Then what?
Well, where's the contract at? Do they have to pay it?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. I mean, so we've got to also protect the players and the parents. Got to make sure they get paid. If all this is good, but as we speak, there's nothing there to protect anybody.
You can see how a players union is the next step in that one, right? I mean,
well, there's some senators up here. Cory Booker's pushed that for years. Every player should be union. They should be an individual contractor. Well, they are that, but you step off into that, and the taxes have to be paid on everything. I'm sure. Now, I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure if you're going to get $1 million as a quarterback, your 4 years at school X, that you're going to have to pay on that $1 million in those 4 years of taxes. But if you're an individual contractor, you're going to have to pay taxes on your scholarship, everything else that you get. And so,
well, it introduces them to a whole new world, right? Unless you're an 18-year-old who understands accounting, which, I mean, there wasn't a lot of us who were adept at that age. I mean, you're a business.
Yeah. And for 40 years I coached, every day we'd talk about keeping agents out of our building, keeping lawyers away from players, accountants. And now everybody's got a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, an agent. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you're playing at school X, and you got an agent out there selling you 24 hours a day at other schools all across the country. Hey, did you see him, how he played this week? He can transfer, come up with some more money. I mean, it's not good for the players. It's not good for the universities, and it's not good for the sport. And we got to protect all three.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I let you go, who's the best team in college football right now?
Oh man, I didn't see many good ones this past week. Of course, and I tell everybody's really on Nick and Alabama. They didn't play very good. You don't play and especially on offense, you don't play very well early. I watched the Cowboys last night. They looked horrendous, the first game. And of course, it's early. Defenses should be ahead early. There shouldn't be a lot of points scored because it's hard to play offense. Defense is nothing but go out there and get lined up and get after it and let the best man win. Offense, I mean, you've got to be, your timing has got to be on. You got to have the right people in the right spots. And I think it's going to be a good year, both NFL and college. I've never seen the interest like it is now, man. It's just out of sight.
Totally.
You know, for what TV's done, the interest for all these talk shows. Gambling is now, that worries me too about college sports. Is gambling more prevalent?
Especially in-game stuff, which I think is there's a lot of opportunity for problems there.
And if you looked and listened to the CEO of Disney today, you know, they were thinking about selling ESPN. What did he say today? No, we're not selling them. We're going to have our own online gambling on ESPN. Well, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for kids to make money in that, in terms of endorsements. And I mean, we got to get ahead of the curve on this NIL before it really gets out of hand, so we can protect, you know, the business, the education, the players, and everything, college sports in general, before this gets out of hand. Because gambling, again, is another thing that we talk every day with our players. Stay away from it. Don't talk to your fraternity brothers because they all gamble. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
All those kids have their little games. Rick, you know, I think Rick Neuheisel years ago, I think he won some money on a board, on a game board, and got in real trouble when he was at the University of Washington because of that. And it's now we're kind of putting it all together, and you better have some rules. If not, it's going to get way out of hand.
Well, I'm glad you're on it. There's nobody better to do it. There's nobody in the Senate or in the entire Congress who knows more about college athletics, taking care of their players and winning championships than Tommy Tuberville. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.